All right, I am joined by Nick Anderson from For the W podcast. Nick, how are you doing tonight?
Doing very well, man. And it's good to finally meet you face to face
Yeah.
virtually, as so many of us do these days, whether at work or at play. It's everything is a virtual meeting now, but it's really given us this opportunity where, like, people with similar interests like yourself and myself, we can get together and talk about some good Brewers baseball.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's funny, just ever since I started podcasting, I've been able to meet people from all over the country and who cheer for various teams and just connect over, our love for baseball and the love to talk about it and all that. And like you said, you're from Wisconsin. Like I was from California. I live in Wisconsin now, and we're both watching this Brewers team that just took 3 of 4 from San Francisco and really I think maybe put the NL on notice that, we're for real.
Oh, absolutely. And as the season has gone on and as we've been watching the standings, like, first it was, the Cubs. The Cubs were still the big rival, and we banished them to the dark place, have not smelled the Cubs in months now. And, just seeing, the NL West, they got a couple teams there that are still a bit better record wise. And that's been the question, right? Can we compete with these other teams? Like, we know we're probably going to be in the playoffs, barring some horrible thing occurring. Knock on wood, by the way.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, like, winning 3 out of 4 against a team like San Fran, where they're the class of the NL right now, and I think we're proving that we belong right up there in that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And we swept the Padres. We took 2 or 3 from the Dodgers when we saw them. The last time we faced the Giants, we were pretty much like depleted because of COVID. We didn't have our A+ relievers. We didn't have our regular lineup. So just being able to face their team full strength and their team for the most part full strength, and then just see what we can do against an opponent and a team that everyone, they see them as favorites in the National League. Of course, the Dodgers as well as favorites, but the Giants, they've been playing really good baseball, and up to I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, they had the best record in baseball. So it's just being able to show them, like, we're for real, and what Burns did and Woodruff did, and even Brett Anderson for like an inning, but he had his monthly in or IL stint. Like
Yeah,
every month I feel like he's on the IL.
yeah, absolutely. We'll take them as they come, 100%. But yeah, to your point, this is exactly what we need to be seeing out of the team at this point in the season. But also, it's nice to see the amount of starting pitching. We've got some good caliber pitchers here. I'm sure you saw those comments made after the National Series. A lot of people talking very highly about this pitching group. We actually, on our podcast on For the W, that me and my friend John do, as we were talking about it earlier on in the year, we decided to call our Brewers segment the sticky stuff, because we were almost certain that once they started to really police this, the doctoring of baseballs,
Yeah.
thought, man, our numbers are going to go down. We're pitching phenomenally. There's no way that we aren't being helped by this. And then when the rule change happened, we thought we were going to see a decline, and it never came. So we're really pumped. We think these are some real studs, and man, what a fun time to be a Brewers fan.
Yeah, and I think the week after that, I think Burns had a bad outing, and everyone was, oh, he was using the sticky stuff, and then he came back, and he's just been dominant ever since. He had just a little hiccup there, and I think that was his start in Colorado, where pitchers really don't succeed in Colorado with the atmosphere there and the high altitude. So that probably played a big factor in it. But yeah, this team has been really fun, and it's crazy because if you were to ask me just 2 or 3 months ago, was this team going to make the playoffs? I don't know if I could have said yes, because they were under 500. They were losing. The Cubs were winning, and now, like you said, we banished the Cubs, and we made the Cubs sell off all their key pieces. I mean, they're trying to avoid doing that, trying to maybe get one more run out of their core, and then the Brewers were able to end that pretty quickly not too long ago. And now Chris Bryant, he's in San Francisco. Javi Baez is in New York, and then Rizzo, I think the Yankees. So everyone has kind of left on the Cubs, and I think we're leading by 10 games. Maybe I have to double check the exact number, but Yeah, this team is really well positioned to make a good deep run in the postseason.
Absolutely. And last I checked, I think it was like 9.5 games.
Okay.
And the other thing that I think that makes it really fun to be a Brewers fan right now, especially is especially well, where I'm located, I'm right between Milwaukee and Chicago, basically. So when I go to my workplace, half of the people there are big Brewers fans.
Mm.
Are the company owner is a big Brewers fan, has a big Brewers flag flying out front during Brewers season. But we've got all these Cubs fans, and man, I mean, the season started and the amount of trash talking, but you get to that point, and we've talked about it all season because I always take the Brewers with the grain of salt. I've been hurt by the Brewers a few too many times in my young life, and as the season goes on, we always were kind of joking that like, yeah, it's hard to care. Let's see what happens at the All Star
Hmm.
break. Once we get to the All Star break, maybe if we're doing well and we start being the team that's looking for talent, then we know we're in a good spot. And I mean, we're all the above. I think we elevated to that level before we got to the All-Star break. Then we start making some moves, start bringing in some help, and man, now I think now we've got our call-ups. We look like we've got a pretty nice roster to go into the playoffs with.
Yeah, and when you look at just looking at the roster, and they did call up Daniel Vogelbach and they called up Topa to as a or one position player, one reliever as September 1st we were able to call up. And they originally, I think before it used to be, I can't remember the exact number, but they reduced it so that you can only call up two players. I wasn't sure they were going to bring up Daniel Vogelbach just because we have Rowdy Tellez, and he's been playing really well at first base. But yeah, no, Danny Vogelbach, he's back, and Topa is here, and I think that if just looking at this rotation, we're really well positioned. Like I said, one, two, and three are starters. Like there's like 1A, 1B, and 1C. Like they're all three of them could start a playoff series for any team.
Right.
And we're lucky to have them all on our team. And no team wants to go into a 5-game series or a 7-game series and face those guys 1, 2, 3, and then the top again, because you're only going to use 3 starters most likely in the postseason. So
Yes.
you'll see Brandon Woodruff twice, you see Corbin Burns twice, and you'll see Freddie Peralta once. And there's not very many teams that can come in and feel confident that they're going to be able to win.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not a lot of teams that can compete with that type of starting talent. And then the other thing I do like, and I was talking with a buddy of mine about this, about the call up of Vogelbach. I thought it
Mhm.
was interesting because, like as you mentioned, Tellez has been playing pretty well there. But my thought process and what me and my buddy ended up talking about was, does this mean that they're imagining World Series we're gonna have him at the DH spot? Because that's my first thought. He provides some pretty good hitting, but man, big boy. I think that's interesting. I think it's an interesting call up.
Yeah, I think the main reason is just the Eduardo Escobar injury because he was having some time at first base, but with him being on the 10-day IL, they needed another first baseman, and obviously Daniel Vogelbach has that role. And to your point, when it comes to World Series, and if we do have the World Series and we do have a DH, yeah, he will fit right into that spot. He was. That's kind of like the role I envision him in heading forward, probably starting next season when the DH, fingers crossed, comes to the National League, because I am over seeing pitchers try to swing and get hurt, and eventually you'll see one or two of them hit a home run, and everyone loves it.
Yeah.
But then you think about 98% of the time when they don't, they don't hit a home run, and they don't get a single, and they strike out, and they look just really, they don't even look competitive at the plate. I think that's eventually going to be what his position is in his role going forward for this team. But I also think just the way Council is and how he mixes and matches his players. When it comes to the DH next year, he's just going to have that added tool to be able to give somebody a break. We saw him do that with Willie Adames when they were playing an American League team. My mind's blanking on who they played just recently. And he was their DH for the 3-game set, just kind of get him back on his feet after having him come back from the IL. So I think Council's I don't think he'll have one set person in that DH role. I think we'll kind of see him mix and match. But yeah, I think he's going to get a lot of time there next season as a DH if he's still on the team. There's always that caveat because they have so much depth on this team. They don't need him. I mean, they can find someone to do what he does, maybe even better. Now that the National League is expanding to that role,
Yep.
potentially, fingers crossed and all that, there's gonna be other players who they can probably sign who maybe don't strike out as much, and they can still offer some pop in the lineup. So I don't know where he's going to be next season. I think they like him on the team. So it's just kind of a wait and see thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad he's on the roster because he does provide some pop off the bench. He can hit home runs very far. Like, we've seen him when he was in Seattle and he was an all-star. Um, Although that team was not very good that season, and so he was like their default all-star.
Yeah.
But even still, like he was an all-star. He had like 30 home runs or so he has that in the bag. It's going to be interesting to see how it all moves forward next season. But this season, yeah, I mean, if we make it to the World Series, like you'll see him for sure being a DH here and there.
And he strikes me as like one of those guys, like you see it a lot in Wisconsin sports where we'll pick like kind of an obscure player for a team
Mm-hmm.
that we just decide like we as a state embrace you. I think he
Yeah,
may be the guy as we get closer. We've seen players like John Kuna, the Packers, recently now Bobby Portis of the Bucks. Just the whole state is just like out in support of these
yeah.
obscure guys. And yeah, I think this might be his time to shine in Wisconsin. We'll see.
I don't know. To your point, like you make a really good point, but for me, I feel like Rowdy, just with his name and the Rowdy chants, I feel like he
True.
kind of that lends itself to kind of just like the Bobby chant. Now it's like the Rowdy chant. Like, you're not going to chant Daniel, Daniel. It's not as catchy. So
The catchiness of the name is a limiting factor here. That is a great.
yeah. No, for real. Like if you even like Stephen Vogt when he was on the team, like what 2, 3 years ago, his I believe in Stephen Vogt chant, like that started when he was in Oakland and it's pretty much carried on everywhere he's been.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like there's some players that just have like that look and really like, and you're right, Wisconsin, we really just like attach ourselves to one player, and they're not always even the greatest player either. I'm trying to think who we like Travis Shaw, even like he had one good
Yep.
season, then he was, and then he's the mayor of Ding Dong City or whatever it's called. And I'm like, well, he's really not that great of a player, and
Yep.
he had really one good season. But yeah, no, to your point, that's very Wisconsin like. And I think if it's not Daniel Vogelbach, it's probably going to be Rowdy. And even with his walk-off hit that we saw him have a couple weeks ago, and they were chanting Rowdy, it's really cool. I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, it's interesting too. It's just like one of these things as we watch the season go on, and I think as we talked about earlier, I think we're all praying for the DH to become a part of this, because I think ultimately, as baseball has such a great tradition, there's such a history there, and as we look at it, it's like it's good that baseball is trying to kind of change with the times. I think that has been one of the limiting factors of baseball over the years is the inability to change with the game and with the trends of the game. I mean, no, like you say, when a pitcher hits a home run, people freak out. It's
Mhm.
really cool, but it's so rare and it doesn't improve the game. And pitchers are so specialized now compared to when the sport began. I think we'd all rather see some real hitters. I mean, it would just make it more fun. And we've seen how much offense has decreased this season. Some people would say, prior to the sticky stuff a little bit more, but yeah, I think that's all factoring. And I think it would be a good change. They should really consider it if they're not already. I mean, they need to really make it happen.
Yeah, and with the CBA negotiations happening this offseason, I'm pretty sure that's going to be one of the factors in there. Probably expanded playoffs as well. I think that's going to be something they're really going to key in on. I think they want to get rid of this one game wildcard game, which I completely hate. And we saw what happened in 2019 with the Brewers. When they were one of the best teams in the National League, and they get stuck with the one game wild card. We have an error, next thing you know, we lose, and the season's over. And it's like, really, it's not
Yeah.
very baseball like to play 162 and then have a one game deciding factor. That's not football. That's what football is, and that's how
Yep.
some sports are. But that's not baseball, and that, to me, I think that's one of the things they're probably going to get rid of, and as well as add the DH. And you'll see teams like when like the Red Sox when they had David Ortiz and
Absolutely.
yeah, and then and Edwin Encarnacion on the Blue Jays, and I'm trying to think the one who just went to the Rays, Nelson Cruz, who's been a DH for the last like 6-7 years, and he's hit like 40 home runs, and he's like 48 years old or something. Like, can you imagine if that guy was on every team in the National League? Like, offense would go up. Like, it's just so much better for the game.
Yeah, and it's fun, and you can put a guy there. I mean, back to the history of baseball. You know, when people talk about like the greatest slugger of all time, it's Babe Ruth. And I mean, we're talking about that's not a guy that you're going to want playing. You know, he's playing first base too. You know, it's like
Yeah.
no, that's the guy you put it. You let him chill. You know, we don't need his athletic ability. We need his strength. We need him to just knock a
Yep.
couple out of the park. So. Yeah, I think it's in a way it's true to the spirit of the game ultimately to go that route. But yeah, it's a big change from what we've seen. But and I think it will probably also help with a lot of pitchers and their longevity. One less aspect to have to worry about in their week to week. I mean, I don't know how much most major league pitchers are worrying about their batting, but it's a distraction regardless.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you see, I think every year there's one or two injuries that comes on a swing. Pitchers swing too hard, they pull a muscle, they strain a muscle, and next thing you know, they're out. So it's that's frustrating to see. And you're right. Like, I think I never, like, I grew up in California, so I watched AL baseball like my whole life, and then when I came to Wisconsin and like I watch, and I of course I had always seen National League baseball, like, it's always on, and I'm a baseball junkie, so I watch a ton of it. But it's different when I'm seeing mostly now National League pitching and National League hitting, and it's just a whole different. And I'm old school too, in the sense that I like the traditional thing. There's not a lot of changes I'm okay with, but I think this is one change I will definitely be rooting for it, and hoping it does happen, because like you said, it'll make the game so much more exciting. Fans will love it, and that's what Manfred wants anyway. He just finds the stupidest ways to fit, to get to that goal, and they usually don't work. Like man on second base and 7-inning doubleheaders and just other crap that he continues to do.
Yeah, and it's one of those things and that's kind of the crux of sports, right? Because you have all these people that are hardcore fans and that know all these intricacies, but at the end of the day, there's always the bandwagon fans, and as the game progresses, they're going to always have to cater to those fans. And we always joke on our podcast, like, bandwagon fans welcome here. Like, there's tons of people jumping on the Bucks bandwagon, but for whatever reason, once you see something that casual fan can cling to, that makes a world of difference. And I think, like you say, it just makes it more accessible to have that improved offense to the casual fan. I mean, there's that. I don't know how old you are. There's that old.
32.
Oh, okay, so we're pretty close in age. I just turned 35.
Okay.
There's that old ESPN commercial, and it's like a bunch of these Braves pitchers, like in the 90s. Like, it's like Smoltz and Glavine, and they're sitting there and they're pitching, and all the girl fans are like watching, and they're watching like all the dudes hitting hitting dingers, and then they're like, "Hey, we got Cy Young winners over here," and like everyone's ignoring them, and then like, man, chicks just dig the long ball. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I look at it. Like, how do you get that casual fan interested? And offense will do it. Now, then after they get into the game, then they'll stay for the pitching, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you would hope, right? And especially if your team's good, like the Brewers are, it's easy for the casual fan to really get invested. And like you had mentioned, how like in the beginning every season, you're kind of like, what's going on? Because like this team, as well as many Wisconsin teams, I guess I should say, like, have a tendency to really break your heart when it comes to sports. And of course, I think that's the big part of sports that happens to everybody, because only one team wins at the end. So like, part of sports is heartbreak, and but it's still exciting to be invested in this team that has been good pretty much for the whole season. I know they had some slumps for about a month in the toward the beginning, but yeah, they've been really clicking on all cylinders. And like, you see more Brewers jerseys out and about when you go out. I know it's not too many people can go out now with COVID and all, but you're starting to see people wearing more Brewers hats, and you see more Brewers gear, and you're thinking, okay, this team is really starting to, or the city is really starting to feel like the vibe after the Bucks won, and now they're thinking, now it's the Brewers' turn. And I'm not a Packers fan. I'm actually a Raiders fan, but even like Packers fans are like, it's that vibe of like, okay, the Bucks can do it and the Brewers do it. And although they're not they're in Green Bay, but still for the state of Wisconsin, maybe all three teams in 1 year can win
Yeah.
or win a championship, like the trifecta.
I love that you say
That'd be
that. That's
sweet.
exactly what we were talking about on this last episode we did, because yeah, this Brewers team looks completely primed. Early in the year, like you talk about, like the slump part of the year. I mean, really, we just didn't have much for hitting. Our hitting just wasn't going. Our pitching, I feel like, has been pretty much dominant all season. Minus plus minus a few games, which any pitcher is going to have.
Mhm.
But as the year has gone on, now to see the hitting start to click in. It looks like Yelich is starting to maybe kind of come back into high gear
Mhm.
here. We'll
Mhm.
see. Fingers crossed there. And yeah, I mean, as we this is when we want to be starting to peak.
Yeah.
So if we keep this momentum, this is perfect.
For sure. And Yelich, he's been playing like incredible over the last couple weeks. Ever since the All-Star break, he's been especially with that 2-homer game a couple weeks ago, and then the grand slam in that game. And I think all of Wisconsin kind of let out like a collective sigh, like, okay, he's back, that vibe was kind of, you see that all over like social media and stuff like that. If Christian Yelich is back, this team has to be a favorite. If he's back to even like 80% of his 2018/19 MVP season, and he in 2019 he could have won the MVP had he not gotten injured. Given Cody Bellinger ended up winning it, but yeah, like this team is like they're good. Like and they had hitting slumps, and then when they got Adames, and that completely changed this team's mindset. He became an instant leader in the clubhouse. Brought that fun vibe again, that don't quit attitude. Like we've seen them come back a lot more now than they did in the beginning of the season. And whenever they had the lead, or if they lost the lead and they didn't have it late in games, like none of us had confidence that they could win. Like we didn't think that they were going to come back and win. But now I feel like we just need to get one guy on base and let the rest of the team kind of do their thing. And that whole mindset of a lot of that came from Adames and what he was able to bring. I mentioned this not too long ago on my podcast. He when he came up in 2018, I think that Rays team won 90 something, maybe 94, 95 games. They missed the wild card because I think Oakland and the Yankees we had only a couple more games than they did, but they should have been in the wild card. And that's one reason why I hate the 1-game wild card, where a team with 90 something wins, like they don't make the playoffs. But whatever, that's a whole different conversation. But then 2019 they make it to the World Series, or 2020 they make it to the World Series, and this guy has known nothing but winning. And as soon as he comes here, what happens to Wisconsin or the Brewers? They start winning. So it's just that whole vibe that he has. Really has helped the Brewers out, and this front office has made some crazy cool moves, like picking up Hunter Strickland, who had kind of fallen off. Like he was with the Giants and was really good with the Giants, but he's probably best known for punching Bryce Harper, and then
Yeah.
he's been lights out for them, and they get Cousins from nowhere, and Jake Cousins has been incredible for the Brewers, and they just kind of always seem to pick up random players here, and everyone has stepped up from like Billy McKinney to when he was on the team. Now he's gone, and Jacob Nottingham, and he's gone, and Jace Peterson, he's been playing incredibly well, and it's just this whole team has a whole different vibe, and it feels like they have something special going on, and you can kind of feel that sometimes with different teams, and that doesn't always equate to a World Series ring. But you got to have that vibe, that feeling of, we can actually do this. And the Brewers for sure have that going on.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned, Adames has been a huge addition to this team. And that's kind of when a little bit different, but when we got Yelich too, it's kind of like, oh yeah, we just got some guy, right? And then,
Mm-hmm.
but somehow our front office has made some like sneaky good moves.
Oh, yeah.
It's just it's incredible. I think Axford would have been kind of cool too if he didn't get injured right away. I was kind of bummed with that one as well. But just bringing him back, I thought, it's almost like the Randall Cobb to the Packers thing. But I digress. As as we've seen this, I think the other aspect too that I don't think we should underrate in any way is what a difference it makes to have a guy like Craig Counsell there managing the team. He's kind of seen it all. He's been around the game forever, knows the city of Milwaukee. I mean, who better could you have at the helm? It's almost like it's been so steady with him as a manager that, like, I don't think he gets necessarily the credit that he deserves.
Yeah, and I hate when I see people complain on any type of social media how he is holding the team back, and I saw a lot of that in the beginning of the season. And no, he's probably, I think he's the longest tenured manager in the National League. He's probably a top four, top five coach, manager, I guess, in all of baseball. Like any team would want him to lead them, and he's really good at getting the most out of his players, and you want that as a manager who can really, because you see teams with like talent, but they can't win.
Yeah.
And then there are some teams with not as much talent, and their manager is able to get the most out of it. And you can really see the impact that managers have. I think of like Alex Cora on the Red Sox. When they didn't have him last year, they were one of the worst teams in the American League, and they have pretty much the same roster this season. Alex Cora comes back, and now they're a wild card team. So I think the manager is so important, and that's sometimes overlooked, and he's sometimes overlooked. And I'm surprised he hasn't won a Manager of the Year award. He won't win it this year. I think that's probably going to go to the manager in San Francisco, just based on what they did and how they were able to turn their whole team around and become World Series contenders. But yeah, he's so overlooked. He's so underrated, but he is so good at what he does. The players love him. They love playing for him. He's younger. Like he kind of he mixes the analytics with that old school vibe. Like he has a really good feel for the game, and that's really one quality that you can't really teach. And so I love that about him.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I like the comparison of Alex Cora, another guy that played for the franchise for a bunch of years, has history there, can relate to the players. But then, yeah, as you mentioned with Counsell, it's like, he mixes the art and the science of baseball, going using the data analysis that we have now at our fingertips and, mixing it with some of this. There's an aspect to the game, or to anything. I mean, whether it's, baseball, football, whether it's, writing a paper, it doesn't matter. There is a part of everything that is sort of like feeling it out, going with your gut,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I think he's had enough of those situations that he can mix the art aspect with the science aspect of it, and yeah, I think we're seeing that. And man, I just hope that what I anticipate we could be this year, I hope we continue to see that, and I hope we continue to ascend.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think this team is, like I said, this team is really well positioned to go deep in the playoffs. They have a really good roster. They don't really have like a weak link anywhere on their team. I guess I had asked Vinny Rotino actually this 2 days ago, yesterday actually, if there's anything that he's looking for from this team heading down the final couple weeks of the season, and he said no. Like this team, he said, is set to win a World Series, and I agree with him. And obviously, he works for Bally Sports Wisconsin. He's a pre and post game guy, and he's really in tune with this team. And I agree 100% with his comments there that this team really doesn't have anything left to do this season but stay healthy. I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing. Can Christian Yelich stay healthy? With the back issue, like there's always that worry that something's gonna pop back up, and it's always like a lingering thing there. I'm glad to see Adamas back. Eduardo Escobar, I mean, he needs to be 100%, and he needs to be ready for the playoffs. Freddie Peralta, I think he's coming back to make a start against the Cardinals, so we'll see how that works out. But if he's back and healthy, then we're good to go. And I think that's just the biggest thing this past the next couple weeks here as the season wraps up, which is again wild because I feel like we just started spring training a couple weeks ago, and already the season is almost over. But yeah, I just think just stay healthy, and this team heading into the playoffs, they have a really good shot to go far.
Yeah, let's hope we see exactly that. And yeah, maybe we get that three-peat championship. Maybe we see the Packers do it afterwards. I know we'll be talking about it. I'm sure you'll be talking about it, and possibly we'll be talking about it together.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure, definitely. And give your podcast a shout out again, and let us know where we can find you guys on social media and all that. Because I just like we just met a couple weeks ago, and I've listened to the past two episodes, and you guys do a really good job, you and your co-host. And I think I want more people to listen to you guys. So definitely give out a shout out to your podcast and where we can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do the show with an old friend of mine. We've known each other since we were 10 years old, and he comes up every week to do it. But yeah, our podcast is called For the W. We are at forthew.buzzsprout.com. That's our main feed. And from there, you'll find we're basically everywhere you find podcasts, whether that's Spotify, whether that's iTunes. We're literally everywhere. We're on Amazon, a whole bunch of like random others. We're literally everywhere you get podcasts. You can find us on social media at For the W Podcast and on Facebook and Instagram. And then if you go to Twitter, it's for_the_W_pod. A lot of underscores on there, but we got what we could take. So, yeah, happy to be with you here. And yeah, we'll definitely be having you on our podcast here in just a couple days. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to be working with the Walking Off pod as well. So this is great.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and end this broadcast now, and we'll talk to you on Monday.
All right. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah.